Didst thou know that the might of thy limbs doth not solely pertain to the passage of years? Many an elder doth believe that feeble limbs, the struggle of gait, or the ache of sinew are but the inevitable companions of advancing years. Yet verily, the truth doth reveal that thy diet doth wield a far greater influence than thou dost perceive. Each step thou takest, each moment thou dost stand, and every ascent of yonder stairs doth rely upon the fortitude of thy muscles, bones, and joints. The victuals thou dost consume either do fortify and shield thy limbs, or, in hushed manner, do enfeeble them as time doth pass. Alas, a multitude of elders, in their ignorance, partake of victuals that do harm to their sinews, impede the flow of their blood, and render their bones frail, thus rendering their movements ever more laborious as the years do wane. What tidings of joy dost thou bring? Thou possessest the might to alter this fate. Thou art ne'er too advanced in years to embrace choices of healthful nature. By shunning the ill-fated fare and welcoming the virtuous sustenance, thou mayest reclaim thy vigor, diminish thy anguish, and preserve the fortitude of thy limbs for many a year hence. Pray tell, which victuals doth stealthily deprive thee of thy graceful movement? Pray, attend. Herein lie 5 common victuals that dost diminish the strength of thy limbs, and what fare thou shouldst partake instead. 1. Processed sugar, the quiet slayer of strength. There exists a certain solace in a touch of sweetness, a morsel of sweetness in thine morning brew, a delicate slice of cake at a gathering of kin, or perchance that well-worn custom of grasping a cookie after the evening repast. It doth seem innocuous, akin to a modest boon bestowed upon one after a weary day's toil. But prithee, what if I were to reveal that this common delight doth stealthily sap the vigor from thy limbs? Many an elder doth encounter the frailty of muscle, the ache of joints, and an ever-deepening weariness, oft unaware that the sweet poison of sugar doth greatly contribute to their waning ability to move. Thou mayest presume that weary limbs and rigidity are naught but the toll of advancing years. Yet the wisdom of science doth reveal a different truth. Lo, the surfeit of sugar in thy repast doth gradually enfeeble thy sinews, rendering it more arduous to remain vigorous, and perchance heightening the peril of grave afflictions of mobility. When thou dost partake of sugar, be it in the guise of sweet confections, effervescent brews, flaky pastries, or even the concealed sugars lurking within packaged fare, thy body doth encounter a swift ascent in the levels of blood sugar. In the beginning, this may bestow upon thee a sense of vigor, yet such a boon is but fleeting. The swift ascent is soon met with a most grievous fall, bequeathing upon thee a sense of weariness, languor, and frailty. As time doth pass, this pattern doth disturb thy body's power to govern energy, rendering even the simplest of movements a weary toil. Yet the harm doth penetrate far beyond mere fluctuations of energy. O sweetened bane! Excessive sugar doth stoke the fires of chronic inflammation, a most nefarious foe, the architect of joint affliction and the thief of strength from sinew and muscle. When thine body doth suffer from unceasing inflammation, thy joints dost grow stiff, swollen, and filled with pain. Particularly in those weight-bearing realms such as thy knees and hips, inflammation doth also lay its hand upon the fibers of muscle, rendering them less supple and more susceptible to harm. Thus doth many an elder grapple with unyielding pain or weightiness in their limbs, even in the absence of a manifest wound. And lo, there doth arise the matter of insulin resistance. As we traverse the passage of years, our vessel's response to the sweet elixir of insulin doth wane, yet a diet rich in sugary delights doth hasten this descent. When the shadow of insulin resistance doth descend, thy muscles cease to embrace the vital nutrients, such as protein and amino acids, the very foundations they require to maintain their strength. Without the sustenance most fitting, the sinews dost wither and lose their strength. Without the sustenance most fitting, the sinews dost wither and lose their strength is the reason why those of advanced years, who partake in sweetened fare, oft find their sinews withering at a swifter pace, rendering the art of balance and movement a more arduous endeavor. Lo, beyond the sinews and the joints, the sweet poison doth rob thy bones of their fortitude. Dates, or the sweet nectar of the coconut palm, which doth exert a gentler influence upon the levels of blood's sweet essence. Lo, the fruits of nature's bounty dost appease thy craving for sweetness, whilst bestowing upon thee the gifts of fiber, antioxidants, and vital vitamins, safeguarding thy sinews and bones with tender care. When cravings dost assail thee, seek out dark chocolate, nuts, or a modest portion of yogurt adorned with berries, rather than the siren call of processed confections that bestow naught but hollow calories. And above all, remain vigilant of the sugars that lie concealed. Oftentimes, those victuals encased in their wrappers, proclaimed as wholesome, are beset with the sweetness of sugar in abundance. Yogurts, granola bars, dressings for salads, and even loaves of bread may harbor within their depths a treacherous abundance of added sugars, which doth conspire against thy well-being. Ever dost thou scrutinize the labels, and aspire for sustenance whole and untainted, that bestoweth enduring vigor and nourishment upon thy being. 9. The choices thou dost make this day shall dictate how well thou dost fare on the morrow. Though sweet as a fleeting pleasure, sugar doth stealthily usurp thine faculties, rendering thee unable to tread, to stand, and to dwell in independence. Let not that which is easily averted govern the course of thy destiny. Seize the reins of thy fate, that thy limbs may endure, steadfast and robust, for many a year henceforth. Secondly, fried delights and hasty repasts, the covert foe of thy joints, dost lie in wait. There exists a certain delight most profound in the crisp of a golden-hued fry, the crackling embrace of fowl fried to perfection, or the soothing warmth of a morsel deep-fried in joyous indulgence. These victuals, well known and simple, oft entwined with recollections of kinfolk assemblies, joyous festivities, or even the most modest instances of delight. Yet, whilst they may delight thy palate, they do, in silence, sap the strength from thy limbs, render thy joints rigid, and render thy movements more arduous with the relentless march of time. Many an elder doth hold the belief that their waning mobility, the ache of knees, and the weight upon their legs are naught but the inescapable toll of the passage of years. Yet verily, the essence of thy sustenance doth hold equal weight to the passage of fleeting years. Fried fare and hasty repasts dost rank among the most deleterious selections for thine muscles, joints, and circulation, 3 vital elements of leg fortitude. When thou dost partake of fried victuals, thou dost lay bare thy body to the treacherous trans fats, those most inflammatory substances of our contemporary repast. These fats do not merely lead to the accumulation of weight, they incite a great tumult of inflammation throughout the body. Verily, chronic inflammation is a stealthy scourge, bringing forth stiffness, swelling, and pain that render the simplest of movements, be it walking, standing, or ascending stairs, an arduous endeavor. As time doth pass, the harm doth gather, resulting in frail cartilage and a heightened peril of arthritis, a plight that doth beset countless elders and greatly doth diminish their ability to move. Yet the harm doth not cease thereupon. Fried and hasty victuals do hinder the flow of blood, thus thwarting thy muscles from receiving the vital breath and sustenance they require to maintain their strength. Alas, the wretched flow of blood doth bring forth leg cramps, an unyielding weariness, and a weighty, languid sensation that rendereth even the briefest of strolls a toil most exhausting. For those of advanced years, the preservation of fine circulation doth hold great import, not solely for the vigor of muscle, but also to avert dire afflictions such as deep vein thrombosis and peripheral artery disease, both of which may summon forth perilous clots of blood and hinder one's mobility. Another grave concern doth lie in how these victuals doth contribute to swift accumulation of weight, which directly doth affect thy limbs. The greater the burden thou dost bear, the heavier the toll upon thy knees, ankles, and hips shall be. Forsooth, With each additional pound of corporeal weight, thy knees dost bear fourfold the burden of pressure, rendering movement ever more arduous and fraught with pain. Thus, many an elder, who doth oft indulge in fried fare, doth grapple with the afflictions of joint pain, instability, and a heightened peril of falls. The superfluous burden doth hasten the decay of cartilage, that which doth serve as a cushion for thine joints. When that cartilage doth wear away, movement turneth not only to anguish, but also to a state most grievous and debilitating. Yet perchance the most neglected consequence of fried and processed victuals is their influence upon the health of our bones. The superfluous burden doth hasten the decay of cartilage, that which doth serve as a cushion for thine joints. When that cartilage doth wear away, movement turneth not only to anguish, but also to a state most grievous and debilitating. Yet perchance the most neglected consequence of fried and processed victuals is their influence upon the health of our bones. These victuals dost hinder the body's power to absorb vital minerals such as calcium and magnesium, which are of utmost importance for the fortification of sturdy bones. As time doth pass, so too doth the strength of bone diminish, rendering fractures a perilous fate for the aged. For hip fractures stand as a foremost harbinger of lost autonomy in the twilight of life. One solitary tumble may alter the very fabric of thy existence, transforming mundane endeavors into trials of anguish. Lo, the tidings be fair, for thou canst seize the reins ere the hour grows dire. Instead of placing thy trust in fried fare, embrace the nobler arts of baking, grilling, or steaming, that thou mayest nourish thyself with healthful sustenance. Cast aside the processed oils, and embrace the noble fats of olive and avocado, for they shall nurture thy joints rather than bring about their ruin. When the pangs of hunger dost arise, choose thou nuts, roasted chickpeas, or crafted morsels that grant sustenance rather than inflame the body. When thou dost partake in the pleasures of dining beyond thy abode, let thy choice lean towards the grilled or the steamed, shunning the temptations of deep-fried fare. Petty alterations doth accumulate, and the toil thou investest in thy sustenance this day shall bestow upon thee mightier limbs, enhanced agility, and a profound sense of autonomy in the seasons yet to unfold. What thou dost consume hath the might to mend or to mar, to fortify or to enfeeble. The power of decision doth rest within thy grasp. Let sustenance serve as a wellspring of vigor and grace, rather than a source of anguish and constraint. When next thou dost contemplate the allure of a fried morsel, ponder well, is it worth the sacrifice of thine legs' fortitude? Forsooth, the reply may well dictate the manner in which thou dost tread, traverse, and exist in the seasons yet to unfold. 3. Processed meats, alas, do wreak havoc upon the strength of our sinews, devouring them bite by bite. For many a soul, these meats have become a convenient and well-known companion upon the daily repast. A hasty repast of ham and cheese betwixt bread for midday sustenance, whilst bacon doth sizzle upon the hearth in the morn, or a frankfurter at a summer's festive gathering. These comestibles have been intricately entwined within the fabric of our customs and rituals for many a year. Yet, what the multitude doth fail to perceive is that, beneath their ease and savory delight, processed meats do quietly erode the sinews that sustain thy motion. As thou dost age, the preservation of robust and functional sinews be of utmost import, for it safeguardeth thy mobility and independence. Yet, the very sustenance that is meant to invigorate thy form may, in truth, be sapping thy vigor. Processed meats, like unto bacon, sausage, ham, deli meats, and hot dogs, are laden with preservatives, sodium, and pernicious additives that doth gradually erode thy body's capacity to move with grace and efficiency. Amongst the perilous traits of meats refined by artifice, their abundance of sodium doth stand most foreboding. Excessive sodium doth lead to the retention of water and swelling, causing thy legs to feel heavy, stiff, and sluggish, as if burdened by a leaden weight. As time doth pass, this unyielding burden upon thy form doth weaken the sinews, rendering it a greater toil to stand for protracted hours or to tread without vexation. Those of advanced years who partake in a repast rich in sodium oft find themselves beset by more frequent muscle cramps, joint afflictions, and even a disquieting numbness in their limbs, rendering the simplest of movements a trial far beyond what nature intended. Beyond the grasp of water's retention, processed meats doth also weave their influence in the tapestry of inflammation, a concealed yet potent force in the decay of muscle and joint alike. The salts and nitrates in meats processed with artifice do incite a chronic flame of inflammation, which doth stealthily ravage the sinews of muscle, rendering them feeble as the sands of time do flow. Lo, inflammation doth also lay its heavy hand upon thy joints, bringing forth stiffness and discomfort, such that even the simplest of tasks, like ascending stairs or rising from a chair, may seem a formidable challenge. What greater woe, for the gathering shadows of inflammation do not merely hinder thy steps in the present hour, but hasten the decay of thy sinews, rendering thy movements ever more laborious as the years unfold. Another grave consequence of oft indulging in processed meats is the lamentable hindrance of nutrient absorption. Thy sinews crave the finest protein, iron's might, and vital elixirs of vitamins, that they may remain robust and supple. Yet, the nature of meats, laden with chemicals, doth hinder the body's ability to absorb these vital nutrients with grace. Instead of bestowing sustenance upon thy muscles, these victuals render them famished for the aid they require, ushering forth a slow decline in strength that doth become ever more apparent with the passage of time. If thou dost seek to safeguard thy vigor and shield thy limbs from undue burden, 'tis the hour to cast aside processed meats and embrace instead the wholesome, nutrient-rich fare. Partake of meats most pure, untainted by artifice, such as fowl of the grill or the noble fish, which dost furnish thee with wholesome sustenance, free from the scourge of harmful additions. Embrace the bounty of nature's harvest, for within the humble beans, the noble lentils, the hearty nuts, and the delicate seeds, lie treasures abundant in vital nutrients that do nourish and fortify the sinews of strength. If thou dost delight in sandwiches, choose freshly cooked meats or the store-bought deli slices, and accompany them with whole grains and verdant vegetables for a meal most balanced. The choices of sustenance thou dost make each day doth directly influence thy capacity to move, to walk, and to dwell in independence. Though processed meats may offer convenience, they exact a toll far greater. Thy very strength dost wane. To embrace a path of wholesome choices doth bestow upon us limbs of strength, enhanced grace, and the liberty to remain vigorous through the passage of many seasons. The choice doth lie within thy grasp, and in days yet to come, thy future self shall express gratitude for the path thou dost choose wisely. 4. Foods rich in sodium, sapping vigor from thy limbs. Salt hath ever been a companion to our repasts, dusted upon the morn's eggs, blended within the evening's broths, and concealed in the processed fare that doth render life a trifle more facile. Yet prithee, what if this humble element, so slight and well known, doth conspire against thee? What if the very essence that doth enrich thy repast is, unbeknownst to thee, sapping the vigor from thy limbs, rendering thy movements ever more arduous with the relentless march of time? Many an elder doth encounter the weight of heaviness in their limbs, the swelling of flesh, and the frailty of muscle, and they do presume it to be but a common facet of the passage of years. Yet, in truth, an abundance of sodium within one's fare doth greatly contribute to these woes. It is not solely the matter of elevated blood pressure or ailments of the heart. Excessive salt doth directly impair thy capacity to walk, to stand, and to move with grace. Amongst the gravest perils of a diet rich in sodium lies the treacherous grip of water retention. When an abundance of sodium doth dwell within the bloodstream, the body clings to superfluous fluid, thereby causing swelling in the legs and feet. If thou hast ever felt thy limbs burdened with unusual weight, thy ankles swollen as if by some cruel enchantment, or thy footwear constricting more than is customary, Know that this plight doth arise from thy body's valiant struggle to contend with an overabundance of salt. Lo, the swelling doth render each motion a laborious task, hindering thy pace and transforming erstwhile simple endeavors, ascending the stairs, enduring long stands, or even rising from a seat, into a wearying trial. Yet, the nature of meats, laden with chemicals, doth hinder the body's ability to absorb these vital nutrients with grace. Instead of bestowing sustenance upon thy muscles, these victuals render them famished for the aid they require, ushering forth a slow decline in strength that doth become ever more apparent with the passage of time. If thou dost seek to safeguard thy vigor and shield thy limbs from undue burden, 'tis the hour to cast aside processed meats and embrace instead the wholesome, nutrient-rich fare. Partake of meats most pure, untainted by artifice, such as fowl of the grill or the noble fish, which dost furnish thee with wholesome sustenance, free from the scourge of harmful additions. Embrace the bounty of nature's harvest, for within the humble beans, the noble lentils, the hearty nuts, and the delicate seeds, lie treasures abundant in vital nutrients that do nourish and fortify the sinews of strength. If thou dost delight in sandwiches, choose freshly cooked meats or the store-bought deli slices, and accompany them with whole grains and verdant vegetables for a meal most balanced. The choices of sustenance thou dost make each day doth directly influence thy capacity to move, to walk, and to dwell in independence. Though processed meats may offer convenience, they exact a toll far greater. Thy very strength dost wane. To embrace a path of wholesome choices doth bestow upon us limbs of strength, enhanced grace, and the liberty to remain vigorous through the passage of many seasons. The choice doth lie within thy grasp, and in days yet to come, thy future self. Though thou may not perceive the consequences at once, yet with each passing day and year, the surfeit of salt doth erode the very strength of thy bones. And yet, lo, sodium doth abound in every corner of our realm. It dwelleth not solely within the confines of the salt shaker. Lo, it doth lie concealed within the realms of processed victuals, canned broths, frozen repasts, cured meats, sauces, and the fare of dining establishments. Lo, a multitude doth partake of salt in excess, oft unaware, for it is infused into countless victuals unbeknownst to their senses. Yet, amidst the shadows, a glimmer of hope doth remain. To lessen sodium's grasp doth not imply the forsaking of taste's delight. It doth signify the art of choosing with greater wisdom. Forsake the artifice of processed fare, and embrace the bounty of fresh, untainted ingredients. Employ thou herbs, spices, and nature's seasonings to bestow flavor, whilst shunning the excess of salt. Substitute thy common table salt with the exquisite Himalayan pink salt or the noble sea salt, for they dost harbor trace minerals that dost nurture the well-being of thy body. And above all, remain ever vigilant of the concealed sodium that doth lurk within the confines of packaged sustenance. To peruse the labels and select those of lesser salt can indeed transform the very essence of thy well-being. The might of thy limbs is not solely governed by the passage of time. It is formed by the decisions thou dost render each passing day. To lessen the salt's grasp upon thy diet is a most facile and potent means to diminish swelling, enhance the flow of blood, fortify thy bones, and allow thy limbs to move with grace and ease. Lo, a modest alteration doth possess the power to forge a mightier, more self-reliant morrow, one where thou dost glide with grace, assurance, and vigor. 5. Lo, the bread of pallid hue and the refined grains of yore. Thou dost deprive thy sinews of their might. For many a decade, the humble white bread, the tender pasta, and other refined carbohydrates have graced the dinner table, a soothing presence amidst the clamor of life. A gentle morsel of toast at dawn's first light, a hearty sandwich to grace the midday hour, or a bounteous bowl of pasta to delight the evening's feast. All doth appear so known, so commonplace. But what if these very victuals, which thou hast partaken for countless years without a fleeting thought, were in silence sapping thy vigor, enfeebling thy sinews, and rendering thy movements less than graceful. Many an elder doth presume that the slow decline of mobility, the weightiness in their limbs, and the ever-increasing struggle to tread upon the earth are but the natural course of the years. Though the passage of years doth bear weight, what many fail to perceive is that their daily repasts do hasten this descent. Though white bread, refined pasta, and pastries may delight the palate in fleeting moments, within thy body they provide scant sustenance, whilst waging war upon thy muscles' fortitude. The plight of refined carbohydrates doth commence with the manner of their processing. In contrast to the noble whole grains, rich in fiber, vitamins, and minerals, the refined grains doth suffer a grievous fate, bereft of their natural bounty, leaving naught but hollow calories in their wake. When thou dost partake of a slice of fair white bread or a dish of pasta, thy body doth swiftly transform it into sweet nectar, leading to a swift ascent in the levels of blood sugar. Though this may grant thee a fleeting surge of vigor, it is oft accompanied by a swift descent, rendering thee weary, listless, and feeble. As time doth pass, this relentless cycle of sanguine surges and descents doth weigh heavily upon thy muscles, diminishing their fortitude and rendering the simplest of movements a greater toil. Yet, the harm doth not cease at that point. Overindulgence in refined carbohydrates doth stoke the fires of chronic inflammation, a most formidable foe to the grace of movement and the vigor of muscle health. Inflammation doth cause the joints to stiffen, the muscles to weaken, and the body to feel heavier than it ought to be. If thou hast ever grappled with weary limbs, unyielding fatigue, or the arduous ascent of stairs, perchance thy diet doth wield a greater influence than thou dost perceive. In contrast to the noble grains, which doth aid in the quelling of inflammation and the restoration of sinews, the refined carbohydrates do indeed perform the contrary. Bringing forth discord instead of harmony, they do nourish the flames of inflammation, rendering thy muscles and joints less able to perform their noble duties. Among the most perilous and enduring consequences of refined carbohydrates doth lie their influence upon the waning of muscle strength. As the sands of time do flow, the preservation of our sinews doth grow ever more vital for the grace of movement, cherished freedom of self-reliance. Yet, when the mortal frame doth oft encounter the allure of refined carbohydrates, bereft of wholesome sustenance, the sinews find themselves deprived of the vital protein and essential amino acids requisite for their fortitude. Instead, they thus begin to shrink, rendering movements that once flowed with ease to feel ever more burdensome. The descent doth unfold with such subtlety, oft slipping past the eye until the most mundane of endeavors, arising from a seat, traversing great distances, or bearing the burden of provisions, transform into trials most unforeseen. Verily, the tidings are fair, for it is never too late to embark upon a transformation. To select the wholesome, unrefined grains or the polished fare may indeed bestow a notable boon upon thy strength, vigor, and the grace of thy movements. Instead of the pale loaf, choose the hearty whole grain or the sprouted grain, for they bestow upon thee fiber and nutrients that bolster the vigor of thy muscles. Exchange the delicate strands of refined pasta for the hearty grains of quinoa, brown rice, or whole wheat pasta, which bestow upon thee a gradual release of energy, free from the treacherous spikes that plague the blood-sweet flow. Embrace the bounty of fiber-laden greens and noble proteins, that thy body may be sustained and thy sinews fortified. Thy limbs dost serve as the very base of thy movement, and the sustenance thou dost provide them shall dictate how nobly they shall bear thee through the seasons yet to come. Thou needest not resign thyself to the frailty of muscle as an inescapable fate of advancing years. By choosing with care in this present hour, thou mayest uphold thy vigor, safeguard thy autonomy, and proceed with assurance for many a year yet to unfold. Each repast doth present a chance to either sustain thy form or to draw from its well-being. The decision doth rest upon thine own hands. Concluding musings. Thy limbs of grace, thy destiny awaits. Thy limbs have borne thee through a tapestry of life's rich experiences. They hath stood by thee through the weary hours of toil, walked beside cherished souls, and granted thee the liberty to wander, to discover, and to embrace life with abandon. As the sands of time do flow, thou mayest perceive them waning, becoming feebler, more sluggish, and less steadfast. Many a soul doth embrace this as an inescapable facet of the passage of years. Yet the verity remains that thy mobility is not solely dictated by the relentless march of time. It is fashioned by the decisions thou dost render each passing day. The victuals thou dost place upon thy plate wield a wondrous might o'er the destiny of thy health. They may either nurture and fortify thy muscles, bones, and joints, or they may, with time, erode thy capacity to move with grace. The waning of leg strength that many a senior doth encounter is not merely a consequence of the passage of years. Oftentimes, it doth arise from years of partaking in sustenance that doth stoke the fires of inflammation, enfeeble the sinews, and deplete the body of vital essences. Yet, take heart, for wheresoever thou dost find thyself upon the path of life, thou canst alter the very course of thine health. Envision, if thou wilt, the dawning of each morn, when thou dost arise with a heart full of confidence, unburdened by the shackles of pain or the trials of struggle. Envision ascending the stairway with nary a doubt, embarking on leisurely promenades with kin, unburdened by the need for pause, and standing proud, free from the encumbrance of discomfort. These be not far-off visions. Lo, there lie before thee possibilities, within thy grasp, yet they demand thine own endeavor, and such endeavor doth commence with the choices thou makest in thy sustenance. If thou hast devoted years to the indulgence of victuals rich in sugar, trans fats, sodium, and artifice, thou mayest already perceive their dire consequences upon thy being. Perchance thy limbs dost feel more burdened than in days of yore, or mayhap thou dost grapple with the frequent pangs, cramps, or swelling that doth assail thee. Perchance thou dost find thyself shunning certain pursuits, for they seem too arduous, too wearisome. Though these trials may appear but trifles in the beginning, with the passage of time, they may usher forth a loss of autonomy that none would wish to confront. To tread upon the earth with unshackled grace, to rise with fortitude, to traverse without the dread of descent. These are treasures oft overlooked by the multitude until they fade into the shadows of absence. Yet it need not remain thus. Through the art of modest and deliberate alterations to thine sustenance, thou mayest commence the restoration of that which hath been marred. By selecting whole and unrefined sustenance, by elevating lean proteins, wholesome fats, and meals rich in nourishment, thou dost bestow upon thy body the means to restore its vigor, regain its suppleness, and shield thy limbs from further decay. It is not of perfection's essence. 'Tis a matter of crafting wiser decisions, one repast at a time. Thy limbs, steadfast companions through the tapestry of thy days, shall bear thee forth into the morrow's embrace. Yet, the burden of their care doth lie within thine own grasp. Shall thou permit the wretched choices of thine diet to rob thee of thy vigor? Or wilt thou seize the reins of thy destiny? The choice thou dost render this day shall dictate whether thou shalt retain thy vigor and autonomy, or whether thou shalt find thyself reliant upon others for the most trivial of motions. Embrace the virtue of health. Select fortitude. Choose thou a future wherein thou mayest continue thy journey, persist in thy stride, and embrace life upon thine own terms. Forsooth, thy legs art the very foundation of thy being, and they merit strength most noble. These teachings are designed to stir thy spirit, urging thee to embrace life in its fullest and truest form. Pray, I beseech thee, share thy thoughts with me. Pause, I beseech thee, and ponder upon a singular truth thou hast gleaned, which thou dost intend to weave into the tapestry of thine own existence. Let us lend our hands in fellowship upon this noble quest to embrace these verities. If thou didst find delight in this moving picture, prithee, leave a comment with a single numeral. If thou dost not, prithee, feel free to comment with naught but a 0. Thy counsel doth hold great value in our hearts. Pray, do not let thine eyes forget to bestow thy favor upon our YouTube channel. Share thy thoughts and subscribe, that thou mayst partake in more such content henceforth. Gratitude I extend for thine attentive gaze, and let us raise a toast to the art of dwelling in accordance with thine own desires.